Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. We are here en La Voz de la Justicia. Tenemos hoy el honor de hablar con ustedes sobre el Parque del Río Duwamish aquí en South Park. Y estamos muy felices de que estén aquí con nosotros en nuestro programa de La Voz de la Justicia con amigos de Seattle. Mi nombre es Paulina Lopez y soy la directora ejecutiva de el Duwamish River Community Coalition, que es la coalición de la comunidad para el río Duwamish. Y voy a pasarle a mi compañero Christian, que van a presentar a nuestras invitadas de hoy y vamos a poder hablar sobre el parque. Welcome, Christian.
Welcome. Hello, thank you. My name is Christian. I am a South Park native and resident. I have lived here off and on my whole life. I just started at the DRCC as a communications and policy analysis fellow, and I am here to introduce Lynn. Lynn, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about what we're going to talk about today?
Hey, thanks for having me here today. I'm super excited. Let's see, I have two hats. I run a nonprofit called Just Health Action, and I'm also a technical consultant to the DRCC.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about the Duwamish Waterway Park?
Antes de hacer eso un poquito, voy a traducir que Lynn es una consultora con nuestra organización del Duwamish, pero también tiene una organización non-profit que se llama la Justicia y para la Salud. Entonces, hoy el día de hoy va a ser ella quien nos puede hablar sobre el parque.
Sure. Well, just really briefly, Duwamish Waterway Park is about 1.3 acres, and once upon a time it was zoned residential, but industry moved in the 1950s and 60s, and then it was changed to industrial zoning.
Algo que es importante saber es que el parque, que es una acre 1.3 y que está localizado en el barrio de South Park, pero se lo cambió a zona industrial por más o menos los 1960 y eso es lo que ha cambiado muchísimo de lo que es ahora el impacto del parque.
And so the park is operated by Seattle Parks, and they've started running it since about 1975, but 4 people have traditionally owned the park. Parks, Este, that's the state Department of Transportation, the Port of Seattle, and King County, but Parks bought the King County portion in 2019.
Y son 4 partes de las que tienes, 4 diferentes propietarios de este parque. Es el puerto, el condado, la ciudad, departamento de parques y fue muchísimo tiempo que se definió de quién está en qué parte del parque, pero lo último es que el departamento de parques compró lo que era de King County.
So when Parks bought the King County portion, they had to sample the soils just to make sure that everything was okay. And what they found was that there was arsenic in the soils that was exceeding residential cleanup levels.
Lo malo fue que se dieron cuenta en este proceso de compra que tuvieron que hacer muchísimos test o exámenes del suelo y se miraron que había contaminación como de arsénico y al momento que se desarrolló la compra y por eso se pusieron a hacer muchísimo más sondeos y muchísimo más pruebas de qué contaminación y en dónde había.
Yeah, so before Parks could renovate the park, they actually had to do a cleanup first, and it was under the model. It's called the Independent Cleanup Program or the Voluntary Cleanup Program.
Y así entró en este proceso de voluntario de limpieza que impone el Departamento de Ecología.
Lynn, can you tell me a little bit about the voluntary cleanup process with parks and what is happening with it right now? Is it still in that phase of cleanup or where is it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the voluntary cleanup program is under this program called the Model Toxics Control Act. And the Model Toxics Control Act is intended there's two programs. There's one called the independent or the voluntary cleanup program, and then there's another one called a formal cleanup process. Both are intended to protect human health and the environment.
Es importante que sepamos que este programa voluntario, ¿no? Es parte de lo que se llama MTCA en MATCA, que son unos orígenes que vienen de la limpieza del Departamento de Ecología. Y también hay uno del voluntario y el otro que es un proceso formal. Los dos van a proteger la salud humana, pero son diferentes la manera en que el Departamento de Ecología, que es el Estado, los lleva y pues por una parte el voluntario es responsable la entidad que es dueño de la propiedad y por otro lado, si es que ya entra un proceso formal, eso es ya que la va a ver el Departamento de Ecología.
So under the independent cleanup process, that's for sites that are considered super simple. And the goal is to receive a no further action letter from the Department of Ecology.
Entonces, a veces lo que pasa es que no recibe todavía esta información de acción y por eso pues se toma diferente medida de lo que hace el Departamento de Ecología. Lynn, feel free to answer the whole question and then I will interpret.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what's happened since then was the Department of Ecology and DRCC was also involved, was watching the cleanup, this independent cleanup happen. And they got worried that the cleanup wasn't complete enough and wasn't ready to open. And so Department of Ecology ended up sort of explaining to parks that they didn't think that they had done enough cleanup before they were ready to open the parks. And they issued a letter, it's called an opinion letter, that they weren't going to give them a no further action letter, that parks needed to do more work on the contamination remaining in the site.
So, lo importante que hay que saber es que el Departamento de Ecología le dio al parque como una carta de opinión que le decía que la limpieza que ellos han hecho no era suficiente para contener y para haber hecho buena la limpieza del parque y no se sentían cómodos en la apertura. Y pues eso fue también con el proceso de nuestra organización como el Duwamish River Community Coalition, que teníamos la preocupación de que quién está mirando por los mejores intereses de la comunidad y queríamos tener un poco de respuestas que se diga a la comunidad de quién va a ser responsable de esta limpieza para que protejan los estándares humanos.
So now the process is going for what we call formal, and that's a good thing. So it means that there's going to be a formal ecology project manager following the entire process. And one of the best parts about this is that there will be public participation throughout the entire process. There was not public participation in the independent process.
Y lo bueno que ahora es que con este proceso de que fue algo formal, un proceso formal, entonces va a haber ya más participación pública parte del Estado. No se sabe cuánto tiempo va a durar, pero va a haber más participación pública y eso es lo bueno, que ahora hay una entidad que va a ser responsable de llevarle a una limpieza formal.
So who did the actual testing then? Are they like sort of local environmental specialists or people that are super familiar with the Duwamish River, people that may have worked on the lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site in other capacities? Or can you shed a little light on that?
The parks has the right to hire their own environmental consultant to do the work, to investigate the site, and they can pick anyone they want. But to be honest, once I started looking at the data, it wasn't clear that the environmental specialists that were looking at the site were very familiar with the LDW, with the lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site. They were kind of looking at this independent Duwamish Waterway Park separately from the Lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site, and I think that was a big mistake.
Interesting. So
La pregunta fue un poquito de quienes estaban viendo como consultores sobre la limpieza, pueden ellos contratar su propio consultor, parques. Y pues sí, ellos, cada entidad puede contratar su propio consultor ambiental y tener su especialista. Lo que teníamos nosotros preocupación es que ese especialista no tenía conocimiento de la limpieza del Lower Duwamish o del río, porque queremos verle como algo general. Entonces no es solamente el parque, pero también esto es conectado con el río y ese conocimiento no sabemos si la persona, la especialista consultora ambiental, tenía esa especialidad.
So the DRCC has done a lot of their own community outreach around the area in the Duwamish River Valley. And one of the questions that the community submitted to us about the park was just why wasn't more testing done before the park was covered with grass?
I think I just don't think that the parks really understood what is referred to as the nature and extent of contamination. So they saw arsenic, they saw lead, they cleaned up the arsenic and lead, but there was contamination throughout the entire site. Like there's more contamination than we thought, but also it's possible that there's contamination in the groundwater. It's possible that there's contamination migrating from the groundwater into surface water, into the Lower Duwamish Waterway. Mm-hmm. So the extent of their investigation was not complete.
Okay. In the voluntary cleanup process, what is the oversight then? Was SPR getting any input from Ecology?
Yeah, Ecology was providing independent, what they refer as informal technical assistance. Mm-hmm. It's not clear to me whether Parks was following the technical assistance advice that Ecology was giving to Parks.
Una cosita que quería recordar que pregunta es como DRCC ha estado haciendo algunos alcances con la comunidad y tratando de traer esta información, una de las cosas que pregunta la comunidad es ¿por qué no hicieron más, tomaron más como testings de la tierra antes de que pongan el césped, el zacate ahí? Y es que lo que pensamos es que encontraron las partes del arsénico, de plomo que estaba contaminado y pusieron a hacer la limpieza, pero no hicieron esa conexión de que pensamos que puede haber también una posible contaminación del agua en la base, abajo, que está conectado con, obviamente, los niveles de limpieza del río Duwamish. Entonces, eso fue lo que hemos estado tratando de ver. Ecología estaba tratando de poner este conocimiento en la comunidad y por eso no se sintió cómodo el Departamento de Ecología de abrir este parque o de decir que se siente cómodo con la limpieza.
So if Ecology is providing this informal technical assistance that Seattle Parks may or may not have been strictly following, do we know if the whole park site has been tested, and if not, what parts have and haven't? And are they more, less, or equally likely to be as contaminated as the parts that have?
The whole reason why we're moving from an independent cleanup process to a formal cleanup process is because the Ecology wants to do what's referred to as a remedial investigation feasibility study process. And that basically means that they're going to look at the entire site and make sure that the site is clean enough for both protection of human health and the environment.
Entonces lo que sabemos es que la razón principal de movernos de la limpieza independiente a la limpieza formal por el Departamento de Ecología es que se quiere hacer una investigación remedial o un estudio de alcance para ver qué tanto se debe limpiar, porque la pregunta es qué tanto se hizo del testing, se testió el parque y qué tan contaminado está, pero ellos no pueden contestar esas preguntas hasta que se haga ese examen o que se tome más pruebas, digamos, para que pueda proteger la salud humana y también el medio ambiente.
So I think I mentioned that I live in South Park, and I have my two sons, Jules and Ridley, who are ages 8 and 6. They go to Concord, and we play at Duwamish. Well, we used to play at Duwamish Waterway Park, parts of it. And I'm interested to know what the chemicals at the park are and how toxic they are.
Okay, so we don't really know at this time all the chemicals that might be at the site, but at this point, we know that in the soil, there's arsenic, lead, mercury, other metals, and then there's probably like chlorinated and non-chlorinated organic chemicals. And what I mean by that is like PCBs. And we know that PCBs are also in the lower Duwamish River. And we also are pretty sure that there's CPAHs, or which are carcinogenic polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And so a lot of this contamination that's in the soils also is reflected in the sediments of the lower Duwamish Waterway.
Are those aromatic hydrocarbons and basically just like petroleum products?
Yeah, they're kind of like, imagine kind of the burning of petroleum hydrocarbons, and then they serve yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, and, it's kind of a byproduct of burning those things.
Yeah, and the toxicity of all of these contaminants really depends on the pathways of exposure. So, for example, your kids, probably the ways that they're most likely to be exposed is by playing in, like digging in the soil or the sand and maybe accidentally ingesting a little bit of the soils or sediments. And then the other way is dermal contact, so on their skin.
Okay.
So una de las cosas que es importante recalcar es que tenemos muchos de nosotros que vivimos aquí en South Park, hijos que quieren ir a jugar al parque del Duwamish Waterway. ¿Y cuáles son mismo las recomendaciones y por qué tenemos que estar preocupados? Es una de las cosas que tiene el parque. Sabemos que tiene arsénico, plomo, mercurio y cosas como los PCBs que han traído muchísima de la contaminación del río y los niveles de toxicidad y todo depende de cuánto tiempo te expongas. Pero, por ejemplo, nuestra preocupación es que si los niños pasan ahí todos los días y están haciendo hoyos ahí, jugando con el sedimento, primero con la tierra que existe ahí, poniéndose en la boca por accidente o exponiendo la piel. Eso es lo que conlleva a que tener posibles consecuencias, porque todos estos provocan cáncer, causan cáncer, ¿no? Entonces, los niveles de toxicidad nosotros debemos saber exactamente cuánto tiempo de exposición te lleva a ser expuestos a esto.
Lynn, is it inherently more dangerous for children to be playing there, or is the risk the same across age?
That's a good question, and it really depends on what your activities are. And children have a tendency to have a higher sensitivity to toxic chemicals than adults, as a generalization. And then children just, are just so much more active. They're just so much more likely to play and get stuff all over them.
It's fact. So what are some of the other exposure pathways that people and pets can be, exposed to this pollution?
Well, I mean, another exposure pathway, which we're just not sure about right now, is whether contamination can get into the groundwater and then kind of migrate into the river, via surface water. and then there could be exposure that way. We don't know. And that's the whole purpose of the RI process, the remedial investigation process, will be to study all of these different exposure pathways.
Wasn't there already a remedial investigation and feasibility study done though?
The answer is yes, but Department of Ecology doesn't believe that it was complete.
Okay, like it didn't study all of those potential pathways?
Yeah.
Okay. And does like weather make a difference? Does, like if it's really rainy out, is it safer or less safe, or does it if it gets dusty and dried out? Is that a factor?
I think the answer is weather does make a difference. Here's two examples. One is we know that air pollution and like that is probably worse in the summer than it is in the winter, just because you've got a lot of dust in the air, and normally the rain will kind of wash all that dust down onto the ground, and so you won't be as exposed. Another example is children or people are more likely to be outside playing on the beach in the summer than they are in the winter, just because of the temperature. So exposure does depend on the weather.
Y bueno, algo importante que hay que recalcar es que dependiendo del clima también que pasa es que se mueven las cosas, el agua puede mover el sedimento, puede mover la tierra, y pues entonces tenemos que ver cómo es que los niveles de contaminación, por eso Ecología más bien está ahora dando la prioridad de hacer mucho más testings o mucho más pruebas para entender cuánta contaminación está y así poder dar a la comunidad un poquito más de instrucciones de cuándo estar ahí, cuándo no y qué cosas se puede evitar. Hacer como como un análisis de riesgo que se llama, para que las personas que están ahí en el parque puedan entender y estén a su propio riesgo. And I'm going to say we have about maybe 5 to 10 more minutes.
Okay, let's get through. Let's say, well, how about, can you answer why is part of the park open and part of it closed, and just generally if the playground is safe there?
Yeah. I think the playground's probably plenty safe. There was contamination. It's been cleaned up in that area. There's now what's referred to as a geotextile membrane underneath the playground area. And then, as you know, it's covered with mulch or playground safe stuff. So it would be really hard for anyone to be exposed to any type of contamination in the playground.
Okay. Do you know how long it's going to take to clean that contamination up?
We honestly don't know until the remedial investigation is done. We have to figure out where the contamination is, what the contamination is, and where it goes.
Okay.
Una de las preguntas que hizo Christian es ¿por qué algunas parte está abierta y otras no del parque? Entonces es que estamos actuando en beneficio de la seguridad y sabemos que si se puede jugar probablemente es ahorita peligroso. Ya se ha hecho la limpieza. Se dice que la parte donde está todos los juguetes para los niños que estén ahí jugando, la parte de que se llama del playground, del parque de los niños, esa parte ya se hizo la limpieza y se puso varios contenedores de contaminación. Entonces, en esa parte se siente uno bien. Lo que estamos pidiendo es que hagan una limpieza y hagan un sondeo mejor para que se pueda sentir la comunidad más segura de estar disfrutando en ese parque.
Lynn, what do you think is the most important thing for community members to know about the park, the cleanup process or the public health risks?
Well, playing is really important for your health. And so I hate to see people not going to the playground and playing. And I think Department of Ecology is just being really careful and making sure that the entire park is safe. I think the one thing that I would like to tell everyone is that the sand, the sand and the sediments are open. You can walk down to the beach and launch your kayaks, and you can go play there with your children and pets. So my recommendation would be, when you come home, just make sure you wash your hands and your feet just carefully, so that the sand and sediments don't come into the house, because we honestly just don't know what the sand is going to have to be sampled during the RI process, and that part of the park is still open.
Algo importante que tenemos que saber es que ¿cuáles son los riesgos de la salud pública? Lo que Lynn nos quiere decir es que jugar es algo muy importante. Estar en espacios abiertos es parte de crecer, parte del aprendizaje. Lo que pasa es que también, si estamos jugando en un sitio contaminado, puede diferir de ese objetivo de estar saludables. Entonces, nosotros con este trabajo esperemos que podamos sentir que le decimos a la comunidad que está segura, que está el parque en una posición de que no está poniendo en riesgo su salud, y más importante, de que sepa las personas responsables que tienen que actuar en esta comunidad de justicia social, que ya tiene muchísimas otras injusticias que están pasando para poder nosotros vivir en una manera saludable.
Lynn, on this radio show, we've talked with members from Ecology prior, and I am aware that they are the primary responsible organization for source control in the lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site. You mentioned that the Duwamish Waterway Park is sort of inherently connected to that. And now that Ecology is taking that, can you just explain a little bit how they're connected, and if this will sort of mean a cleaner and more robust process for the whole river?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So there's this terminology called source control, and it really just means removing contamination and preventing pollution from reaching the river. So assuming that the Duwamish Waterway Park is a source of contamination or pollution, and it might be migrating to the river, Ecology will make sure that park is cleaned up so that the health of the Duwamish River will be better because of the cleanup.
Como sabemos, el Departamento de la Ecología es encargado de mirar sobre los recursos que se llama source control, o el control de la contaminación. Entonces, obviamente que si sabemos que el parque es está viniendo la contaminación de ahí, el Departamento de Ecología no va a permitir, porque hace parte de las metas principales de limpiar el río Duwamish. Entonces se iría contradiciendo que si se están ya eliminando estos recursos que están trayendo más contaminación, y si el parque está emitiendo más contaminantes, pues está yéndose en contra de los objetivos que tiene el Departamento de Ecología, y por eso es tan importante de poder realizar una limpieza que sea óptima para la salud nuestra y para el río Duwamish. And then maybe the last question that we have some time here to answer.
Okay, Lynn, if you could just briefly describe, like, now that the cleanup process is going formal, what can we expect outreach to the community look like? It's an environmental justice community, and I'm just wondering if we can expect more than we've gotten so far.
Thanks for the question. Okay, so because of the HEAL Act, I think that Ecology and everyone else is focusing much more on environmental justice than they ever have before. Mm-hmm. We will be doing an enhanced community engagement process on the Duwamish Waterway Park, which means that there's going to be a lot, the community has a lot of opportunity to engage on the cleanup. And I think we don't know when the park is going to open, but we're hoping, my goal, this is what I think we could advocate for, is how to do the remedial investigation as fast as possible, so we could find out if there are parts of the park that are clean enough to open up the park, like partially, part way,
Okay.
and keep a smaller area fenced off. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Como una comunidad de justicia ambiental, obviamente que es muy importante para nosotros que sepamos la comunidad, qué está pasando, cómo está pasando, que tengamos la voz de decir. Y por eso DRCC con Just Health Action estamos nosotros trabajando para hacer el alcance comunitario de una manera significativa. Y así es que vamos a poder recoger las voces de todas las personas que están impactadas directamente, porque aunque el parque no se sabe cuándo van a abrir formalmente, nosotros podemos tener la voz que necesitamos y tenemos la opinión que necesitamos poner en la mesa para poder nosotros ser quienes definimos cómo queremos esa limpieza y cuándo y cuánto. Así es que por eso es importante tener la información, and that's why I'm just encouraging, it's so important as community members to own the knowledge and to make sure our voice is being represented, and this is why we present this type of informational radio shows and informational series, so then community can make decisions that are going to be informed on the knowledge that we have and on the research and analysis that we have done. So with that, I just wanted to give thanks to our wonderful guest, Lynn, and technical advisor who is always there working for us, with us. And Christian, do you have any final words to let us go?
Well, I'm just really grateful to get this input from Lynn. It's been quite a process trying to find out exactly where we're at. So I am very happy to be here, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
And maybe we will do a part 2 with more questions. So if you're a community member and you're listening to this, please send more questions that you have, concerns, because that helps us shape the programs that we do and bring those questions back to those people that we need to keep accountable. So así es que si tiene preguntas, si es que tiene más opiniones, díganos, porque eso nos ayuda a hacer mejores preguntas al gobierno y así poder diseñar estos programas que son tan importantes. Thank you everyone for being here, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.